Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going to be working on a 2013 Ford Edge. Having some issues with the brakes on this vehicle, and what ends up happening is we get like all the brake pedal. So you step on the brakes and it about puts you through the floor, or through the dash, I mean. Looked online, just kind of seeing if there's any like service bulletins or anything. Found out that these vehicles have a problem with the power booster. They'll start to leak internally, and then the vacuum in there is sporadic, or you'll have issues where you'll get no vacuum, all vacuum. It doesn't regulate it out very well. So today we're going to be working on changing out that power booster. In order to do that, you have to take the upper intake out. You have to take all this out, the battery box. Well, in the process of taking the upper intake out, then you can get to the back side plugs. We're going to change the plugs too. Front ones are easy to get to. There's the 3 coil packs right there. On the back side, it's a little harder because, like I said, this intake is in the way. So that's going to be the project for today. The vacuum booster is kind of buried way back in. You can barely see it. You can see the top of it, like, or the side of it way back in there, kind of like where I'm shining the light at. So it's quite a ways back underneath the cowl. So we're going to work on that. Hopefully it goes well, and see what happens. So the toolkit that I have to do this is pretty basic. I'm going to have to get some other stuff, probably some extensions, just to be able to get the socket down in far enough to get the plugs out. But I'm hoping, other than maybe a couple of wrenches, and I'll lay that out too, I'm hoping that this is pretty much all the tools that I need. I'm going to go ahead and start taking stuff apart, and I'll just do a quick video on that, fast forward through a bunch of stuff, but you'll get the gist of what I'm doing here in just a minute. Alright, so far what we have is air boxes out, battery boxes out. You can see back in there that there's some corrosion. We'll get it out, you'll be able to see it a little better, but there's some corrosion, probably from brake fluid leaking. Hopefully the master cylinder is okay, but it does look like one of those lines is leaking pretty good, so I'll have to kind of look at that and see what's happening. The next step will be, I'm going to get this throttle body off, and then we'll work on getting the upper intake manifold out of the way. And then we can get access to everything on the backside to see how much trouble it's going to be to actually get that booster out of there. We'll go from there. Right now, the only tools that I've actually used so far would be shallow 10mm and 8mm. And then a deep 10mm, just to be able to get the nut off of that rear battery box hold down. because the stud sticks up a little bit. I couldn't get a shallow socket on there. So next will be the throttle body. So if you're looking at this, you've got here, these three, one on the end here, then that long one, and then there's one that's back underneath here that holds it, and then you've got the hose here that pulls off, the clamped hose here that you have to pull off. So once you get that upper intake off, you'll see this, right? So do yourself a favor, it's kind of hard to see down in there, but basically those 6 holes go directly into your cylinder heads and into your cylinders. So if you don't want to turn this into an engine rebuild, I always take clean rags, I just double them over, and I lay them over those holes, because I have seen people drop stuff, and I have dropped stuff, and if it falls down in there, you're gonna wish that you never did this job. So this way you're protected to where you're not dropping stuff down into the cylinders. Make sure that they're covered, and then you don't have to worry about it. So the next step, I think I'm going to go ahead and work on, you can see back in there, taking those bolts out that hold that master cylinder assembly to the booster. And then I'll have to go inside the vehicle, and there's a couple of bolts up underneath the dash. I'll have to try to find that. But for now, we'll get this thing disconnected and see where we can get from there. I think that booster should just kind of pull up out of there, hopefully. All right, so a couple more tools that I ended up having to get here. I just got an extension set and some deep well sockets to be able to get back on the 2 bolts that are holding that master cylinder to the booster. All right, so we're down in here. There's a bolt on the top right, a bolt on the bottom left, and then there's that hole you can see right in there. This hose right here with that fitting on it just pushes into that hole. So that's all that's there on the outside. Now we have to go in the car. We'll have to look up underneath the dash and see if we can figure out where everything's at under there. So from what I can tell, there's 4 bolts. Looks like there's one here. You can see it, maybe. Get this light in the right way. One there, one up there, one on that side, and then there's one up above it. And then there's a pin in the actual pedal, like right in this area here, that you gotta get out to. So I'm gonna work on that and see what I can come up with. Alright, so just as I said, there's 4 nuts. Those 4 right there. This pin setup here goes through the pedal. Look up underneath here. There's a hole right up here somewhere. You can kind of see, let's see if I can get this angle right. Right there you can see that bracket right here. And then the pin goes through the pedal. So it goes basically, that goes there, the pin goes through the bracket, through the pedal to the other side. The problem is, that's this plastic pin, it goes through the whole thing. This metal pin here pushes into this and it gets locked in on this side by these little tabs. Well, the only way to get that out of there is I have to take a screwdriver and go up in here and pry between this plastic right here and pry that center pin out. It's kind of a pain, but it will pry out of there. And then you get a long pair of needle nose pliers, collapse. You can see them. These little tabs. There's a little tab like right there where my thumb is, and one on the other side. You gotta collapse those tabs with needle nose, and then use a screwdriver to pry on this part here and pull that out of the housing, and then you can get the pedal free. So now we're gonna go on the outside and try to work that brake booster up and out of there. See how that goes. What a pain. You can see how corroded that is from brake fluid. So I'm wondering if it's leaking down here, but it's original to the car, so. Alright, here's the new part. Comes with a plug in here. Just pull that out, and that's where your vacuum line goes. And then basically it goes back in. So if you look on the back side here, you've got the 4 studs. You want those to be at each corner, correct? But the most important part is this vacuum port has to be at basically 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock position when that goes in, and that'll put your studs on the back here in the right orientation, and then you can just turn this whichever way you need it to be able to line up with the pedal. So now I'll try to work that back in there. Alright, that's back in there. I just got to go on the inside and make sure that the pedal's lined up correctly, and I can kind of wiggle that around, but it's kind of a pain. One thing I did do was, there was a piece of fiber cowl material. This stuff, I kind of chewed it up when I was taking that out, but it's just got little tabs that hold it on. I just pulled that out of the way. I'm probably just going to leave that out because I really don't like that stuff anyway. It's supposed to be like a sound deadener, but to me all it is a fire hazard, so I'll just leave that out. But anyway, I was able to get that work back in there without scratching everything to pieces. So I'll go on the inside and get all that reassembled, come back out here, get everything hooked back up again, and then we'll start working on the plugs. Alright, so back on the outside, everything inside turned out well. So I'm looking inside of this thing, and to me it looks like the spring, it's a brand new unit, the spring has jumped off of the center and is off to the one side. Huh. Well, I'll have to try to get something in there to straighten that out, so I guess pay attention to that. That your spring isn't shifted off of the pad. That's kind of dumb. I don't know if I'll be able to get it with a screwdriver or not. I think I'm going to have to hook it with something because you can see that one in the back. I think that has to be up on the top. I'm going to grab the other unit and look in there and see. Alright, well, I straightened it out with a screwdriver. I guess just be aware if you're doing this job to make sure that that spring hasn't shifted off of the center. I did get it pried back over, so. Anyway, now the gist of it is just putting it back together the same way we took it apart, so we'll do that. Alright, so the hardest part of that job is done. Getting that thing out of there was kind of a pain, but everything's back together. Master cylinder's bolted up. Vacuum line's hooked back up. So the next part of this process is replacing plugs. The one thing you gotta be careful with here is the coils. When you take them out, just when you're kind of pulling them out of there, they'll come out a little bit stiff sometimes. Every once in a while they leave a boot, and I'll show you what I mean. On the bottom of this coil there's a little rubber boot that goes over the spark plug, and I might run into that on this one. I didn't order any. If I got to get some, I'll just order them and I'll have to finish the project at a later time once that stuff comes, but we'll get into it here. 8mm, there's 3 in the back, 3 in the front, and then we'll go from there. Alright, when you're taking these coils out, I usually just grab a screwdriver, just ever so slightly pry. You don't have to go very much, but they come out. And here's that little rubber boot I was talking about. Sometimes they get stuck. You can see it's a separate piece. It splits right here. So I'm going to work on getting the rest of those out of there. Alright, fortunately all of them came out no problem. I also try to keep the coils where they came from, so keep them with the same cylinder. So for instance, like 1, 2, 3 in this orientation, and then the same on the back. Just keep them to where they're, these are facing back, those are facing forward from whatever side you're working from. And then you can see down in there where the plugs are, so we'll work on getting those. That'll be our next step. Alright, we're getting ready to take these plugs out. One thing, so it's 60mm wrench, socket I should say. Whenever you're taking plugs out of aluminum cylinder heads, you'll feel some resistance when you're loosening them. Whatever you do, if you feel that resistance, don't just keep trying to loosen it. Take that spark plug and try to tighten it back in again, because otherwise what will end up happening is that you'll get that stripped in the head, and if you strip that in that head, see how far down in that is. I mean, that thing's down in there, you know, probably a good 4 inches. So trying to fix that is not going to be fun. So loosen it. If it feels like it's binding up, turn it back in and just keep working it back and forth, and eventually they'll free up and come out. I've never had one stay stuck. You'll always get them to free up and get out of there. So I got the first one loose. I need to grab a spark plug wrench because a regular socket unfortunately doesn't have the foam in there to grip the plug and pull it up out of there. So I'm going to grab that. I'll get the rest of those out, and then we'll talk about gap. Alright, so I'm on the last one, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here when it comes to taking these out. So you turn it about that far and it binds up. So then I tighten it back in, and it sounds terrible. Take it back, bring it back in, take it back out, bring it back in, and it just sounds horrible. This one's the worst out of all of them. But then you'll get it to where it'll free. And then it'll come out. But like I said, it just sounds like it's nasty sounding, like you're ripping threads out, but just got to work it back and forth, because if you keep trying to go loose, it will pull the threads. But these spark plugs are in bad shape. Like, real bad shape. Here's a new plug. And here is the old one. And it's severely burnt out, and the gap is terrible. So I don't know off the top of my head, what the gap is on these. So I'm gonna have to look that up, and then we'll gap these plugs and get them put back in. So what I can find, it looks to be between 49 and 54 thousandths. These out of the box are at 53. At least this one is. So I'll check them all, and if they're all at 53 thousandths, then I'll put them in. That's at 53 as well. So basically putting them back in, just in reverse order. Just take and push the plug into the socket, and then I just start them by hand. Make sure they're going in. I'm sure you're supposed to torque these, but you can look that spec up if you want. I take them to the bottom, and then just a little bit, and that's it. And if your wrench gets stuck on there, like this one did, then you struggle. I think the last time I did this, I learned that you can't push the plug in all the way. So I just barely start the plug in there, just so it's catching. And it comes out. So we'll check the rest of them, make sure they're all gapped correctly, and get those put in. All right, all the plugs are back in. So then we also then just verify that the boots aren't ripped on your coils. Make sure everything looks okay. And then just reinstall those. And put the bolts back in. Same thing with the back side. Alright, all of the coils are back in, and then you just have to plug your harness back into the coil. Make sure it clicks. Push the little red tab down. Alright, all that's back together. The next step will be putting the upper intake manifold back in. Get all this stuff out of the way. Make sure that if you had any dirt or anything fall down on these rags that you covered your manifold with, your lower manifold with, that you're careful so that you don't get that dirt down in the cylinders. So I just kind of pull stuff back out of the way here, and then just take the rags and just kind of slowly take them back across, rolling them up, and just pull them up out of there. Just like that. Verify that there's nothing hanging out anywhere. I don't see anything. I'll take a rag and just kind of wipe some of this up here. A little bit of oil residue on the top here. You probably should consider, if you're pulling the manifold like this, probably should consider replacing the gasket on the manifold. There's a gasket here. I typically just inspect them. If it doesn't look like they're torn. I've never had an issue with them leaking, but you can see that green gasket here. But like I said, I've never had an issue with them leaking. This car's got 170,000 miles on it, and the other Edge that I have has got 270, and I've not replaced it. So, you do what you want. Basically work this back down in, get it to the right spot. There's dowels. Drops down in just like that. There's this long bolt here. And then you've got the shorter bolts. You don't want to go crazy on these bolts because this is everything's plastic here with inserts in the lower manifold. So if you go too crazy on tightening this stuff, you could potentially break it. So just be careful. Like I said, I usually go snug and then just a little bit. Like I said, I know there's torque specs for this stuff, but for what I'm doing, you get the feel for it. back through one more time and just verify that they're tight. And then don't forget, you have one bolt down underneath here. It's kind of a pain to get to. And I made that difficult on myself because there's a hose that I need to hook up underneath there on the back side. Hopefully I can get to that. There it is. That went on pretty easy. Okay, that's on, no problem. Also have this hose that goes underneath the vacuum booster. And I have these little ratcheting clamp pliers. That stay locked, so it makes it easy. You can put it down there. Crank it up all the way, and then it stays locked for you, so you don't have to mess around trying to hold the clamp. And this would have been easier to put on with the manifold out too. But we'll get it. Alright, there it is. So basically, kind of see back underneath there, maybe. It was this hose here, and there's one right back here that just slips on. So now that we got that, throttle body can go back in. And then the battery box and air cleaner. So I'll get that stuff. Same size bolt. Alright, well, I'm going to have to chase those threads, so we'll work on that here in a minute. Alright, so I just used this little thread chaser here to chase that hole. We'll see if we can get that to go in now. I can drop that thing a couple more times. That's better. Okay, last things. I'm going to get the battery box put back in. Got to throw the throttle body back on. That's just 4 bolts. Make sure you connect your plug here. And then I also disconnected these 2 here just so I could get that upper intake out of the way. So we'll get that connected back up, and those connect up right over here. And then button up the rest of this battery box, battery back in, breather assembly, and once I get all that done, then I'll bring you back. Alright everybody, so everything's back together. Air box back in, batteries back in, everything's connected back up again. Total time on this, so basically changing out that vacuum booster and the plugs, total time was about 3 hours from start to finish. So that's not rushing, hurrying. It's just making sure that everything is going like it should. The only thing that I really had for like specialty stuff was these pliers. Basically, they're just for the hose clamps, and they just ratchet and stay. You can use needle nose pliers. I've got a set of long needle nose and short needle nose, but otherwise spark plug wrench and sockets, ratchet, quarter inch drive, 3/8 drive. Nothing too crazy. Pretty easy to do, and like I said, if you don't feel comfortable doing it, don't do it, but it's not that hard to do, and you can save yourself some money. So if you got a basic tool kit and some pliers, a light, and that's about it. Alright everybody, I appreciate you watching. Not too much to changing out that brake booster, so if you could like and subscribe, leave a comment if there's any questions that you have, and we appreciate you watching, and look forward to putting out more videos. Thank you.